This is the Page Publishing Book Club. I'm your host, Alice Stockton Rossini. How you doing this evening? How do you love that bass line? How do you love that bass line? Do you love that bass line, Rob? I think that's what we'll do the show on tonight, bass lines. Now, this is all about authors. This is the Page Publishing Book Club, and if you are an aspiring author, you have come to the right place. This is where you will hear from people just like you who were inspired or compelled to share a story, how they got their story from something they'd been thinking about to a book they can hold in their hands or read on their Kindle. This week is interesting because several of the authors that you're going to hear from found strength from writing, and they hope that by sharing their stories that others are going to find strength as well. So on the line, we have Vicki Nolan. She wrote When You Don't Know What to Do.
When you don't know what to do, that's right.
What do you do when you don't know what to do? Read your book?
What do you do? Well, that's a start. I'm writing the book to people who have gotten to a place where they just want to quit. They're going through some type of trial in their life, and they just have ran out of steam and vigor, and they just feel like quitting. You know, a lot of us have been to that place. And so I tell people that when they get to that place where they want to quit and they don't know what to do and they are running low on hope, that they need to turn to the Lord. I'm a Christian believer, and I've tried the Lord for myself, and I know that there is hope in Him. If nothing else, you feel His presence. You know that you're not alone, and it gives you the strength to just keep getting up in the morning and putting one foot in front of the other. And so that's what you do. You turn to Him.
Can you tell me what made you go through this?
The concept for the book was started about 5 years ago, and the Spirit of the Lord spoke to me and told me to write a book telling about the power of the Holy Spirit, the power behind the resurrection of Jesus Christ. And so it started 5 years ago, and so at that point, the Spirit just started to give me the words to write. The first chapter is titled In Your Darkest Hour, and I'll just talk about that. Some of the chapter titles are In Your Darkest Hour, Hidden Wounds. You know, a lot of us are walking around kind of with veiled faces and, you know, facades and telling everybody that we're fine, but we're really not. You know, we're hurting on the inside. I have a chapter that says that some of God's greatest works were done through people who were in barren situations, who were hopeless. We go to the Bible and we read about several women in the Bible whose wombs had been closed. They could not bear children, and but once they turned to the Lord and trusted in Him, God made what was impossible possible. They were able to bear children. That's an analogy to our lives. A lot of times there is something going on in our life that is impossible through our own efforts.
But what about your life, Vicki?
Well, what I was getting to for those 4.5 years, talking about my life did not come into play, but just a few months ago, I was asking the Lord, I said, when is this book going to be finished? And the Spirit of the Lord spoke and said that I would have to go through some things before it would be finished. And so what happened with me was I received a health diagnosis that there's no cure for. And so during that time, I had to put into play what I had been talking about in this book all this time. I had to practice what I had been preaching. The last chapter is called Through the Fire, where I tell my story.
You're saying that you became compelled to write this book, and it wasn't until you were finished that you, in fact, were faced with something insurmountable, right. Almost insurmountable.
That's right. 4.5 years later from starting the book, then I had a story to tell. At the beginning of writing this book, I had no idea how it was going to end. And so, yes, that's what happened. And so I'm having to read the book for myself, get encouraged by the words that came from the Spirit of the Lord 4.5 years ago that are now encouraging myself. I'm getting some really good feedback from people who have read the book that it is really helping them, it's really, really blessing them. And so that's been my prayer all along, is that it bless people and bring them up out of those pits that they're in and tell them to just keep hoping in the Lord and keep asking Him for help, because, you know, so many times we go through this life and we're taught from a young age, you can do it, you can do it. And that's all well and good, but, you know, sometimes we get to a place where there's nothing within ourselves that is going to help the situation, that we have to turn to someone who is more powerful and who can get something done that that is impossible through our own efforts. And so in the book I talk a lot about being willing to ask for help, even talking to finding somebody that you can trust to really tell and be honest with about what's going on in your life. I truly believe that God provides at least one person on this earth that we can go to and be able to be vulnerable to and express our weaknesses to that person. And sometimes just being able to talk about what we're going through is a really good start.
Do you mind me asking what you're facing?
Parkinson's disease diagnosis. There's
Okay.
no cure for that, so I'm definitely hoping in the Lord turning this thing around for me.
Vicki, I hope so too. I am so inspired by your faith and, you know, your desire to help others while you're in the process of dealing with your own health issues and all the trials and tribulations that go along with that. I also think it's interesting that when Vicki talks about how the words just came to her, you know, does that ever happen to you? Like you wake up in the middle of the night and you have an idea, or you want to write something down, or you want to tell somebody something, and, you know, sometimes you don't know at the time why you feel the need to do that. But there usually is a reason, and, you know, whether it's about faith or whatever it's about, the fact that she had this compulsion to do this before she even realized that in the end she was going to need those words of strength and inspiration herself. Very interesting. All right, Barbara Cook is on the line. She wrote Weeds and Wildflowers, and this is an autobiography about how writing helped her deal with some pretty heavy stuff.
Well, actually, it deals with spousal abuse, rape, and being stalked as far as women go. And then other parts of it address bipolar depression, anxiety disorders, post-traumatic stress disorder, and verbal abuse. And my hope is that anybody who reads it who's ever had to endure those horrors, I'm hoping to offer them encouragement. I survived it, and I hope you can too.
That's pretty overwhelming, Barbara.
I was born in a little coal mining town in Madison, West Virginia. A poor woman who already had 3 children, all of them out of wedlock, each of them with a different father. From what I've been told, she didn't so much as even look at me. There wasn't really a choice whether or not she was going to keep me or not. I don't think it was a matter of whether she wanted to. I think it was a matter that, you know, financially, she just couldn't take on another mouth to feed. So I was adopted at birth. My parents at that time were very good. My father's always been very good. My first mother, when I was 2 or 3 years old, developed a brain tumor, died from it. Then he remarried, and she was the mother from hell. It was kind of like she would be very, very sweet when my dad was around, but then anytime he wasn't around, she stayed on my back. You know, verbal abuse. You'll never amount to anything. You're no good.
So it started with verbal abuse, and then that carried on to relationships later on in your life?
Yeah.
Did you get married?
Yes, I'm on my 3rd marriage, 25 years this time.
And it was your second husband who abused you, raped you?
He was a very, very cruel, mean man. Number one, he was the best looking thing you ever saw in this world. Very good looking. But then after you're married to him for a while, the real him comes to the surface. He was physically abusive, mentally abusive. He abused my son, my older son. My younger son could do no wrong. But I was in a situation where he told me repeatedly that if I left him, he would either kill me or he'd kill my older son, and I knew it. So I had to stay in the relationship until one day the boys came to me while he was gone, and my older boy was a spokesperson, and I'll never forget his words. He said, "Mommy, how much longer are you going to put up with this?" And it was just like a light bulb went off. So I told Donnie that and Chris. I would take care of it. Whenever I gave them a signal, get their cat, pick up their shoes, meet me in the garage of the car, be quiet about it, do not hesitate, move. That's what happened. The very next day, I waited till he got in the shower, told him to do this thing. We got into the car, didn't have a garage door open, so I had to have Donnie open the garage door, and he jumped in, and we got the hell out of Dodge.
Wow. So it turns out you have bipolar disorder on top of all of this?
And I have an anxiety disorder from everything I've been through. I've got post-traumatic stress disorder.
So how are you dealing with this?
Medicines. Actually, writing the book was medicinal in some ways.
So many people that have been through stuff say that just writing it down, but that can't be enough. I mean, I had one person tell me, yep, no, that's all I needed was to write the book. I mean, don't you need psychological help and maybe?
Yes, I've had years and years. I've had good psychologists and I've had bad psychologists. I'll be under psychiatric care for the rest of my life. You learn to live with it. I mean, when you're having the good times, you do what you can do to enjoy those times.
And you decided to write this book now because?
Well, my psychologist actually, she kept telling me that, given my life experiences, I should write a book. And then after giving it a lot of thought, I decided I'd go ahead and do it. I put it on my bucket list of things that I wanted to do before I die. And one evening I began, playing around for the first few pages on my computer. And when I did, events, emotions, even smells began to come back to me. And writing it quickly became an obsession.
So have you gotten feedback?
All the feedback I've gotten from so far has been from friends. I know my psychologist, she loved it. She thought it was fantastic. I've been told that it's a real page-turner, that it's a thriller. I tried to present it in a fashion. I did it in a third party, and I used fictional names. But I tried to do it in a fashion that it would keep our reader's attention. It turned out well in the end. If readers have experienced any of that, if nothing else, I hope that it'll offer an encouragement. I endured it. I survived. You can do it too.
All right, Barbara, thanks so much. You are the second author to come on the show tonight, determined to share your experience to help others. And you know what? I don't think the world will ever get too much of that. So thank you very much. And the music tells me it's time to take a quick break, give you a chance to think about what you just heard. When we come back, we're going to lighten it up just a little bit with a guy who was a real-life Jesse James. I am not kidding. You do not want to miss this. Sit tight. This is the Page Publishing Book Club.
Have you written a book and want to get it published? Then now's the time to call Page Publishing at 800-204-6099 and do it immediately. You see, they're looking for authors of all types of books. And unlike most publishers, Page Publishing will take the time to review most of the books submitted to them. And they'll even give you their feedback. And if they like what they read, Page Publishing will get your book into bookstores and for sale online at Amazon, the Apple iTunes Store, and other outlets. They'll handle everything. Copyright protection, printing, cover art, publicity, and editing. So if you've written a novel, a children's book, a cookbook, inspirational work, a book of poetry, or biography, and want to get it published, then you need to call Page Publishing and do it immediately. Call 800-204-6099 now for your free author submission kit. Your road to fame and fortune could very well start with this simple phone call. For your free author submission kit, call Page Publishing at 800-204-6099.
Welcome back to the Page Publishing Book Club. I'm your host, Alice Stockton Rossini, and our theme tonight seems to be about overcoming adversity and sharing stories in the hope others will benefit. Our next author, pretty much on that same track. Zach Johnson hopes he can help others avoid some of his pitfalls, but he's also hoping one person in particular will benefit from his book. It's called All Men Tell Lies.
The book is actually about a man's growth. It just basically tells the story about my experiences as far as how I grew up, the environment I was in. I grew up in a single-parent household, so I just kind of talk about from the time I actually grew up and the types of relationships that I was actually in and the decisions I made that I decided to make. So I just decided to share my story.
Well, what kind of situation were you in?
So I grew up with my mother. So throughout the book, I just kind of, my decisions I made as far as relationships, I just talked about how not having a father in the home, kind of dictated a lot of decisions I made. I grew up in an environment where I kind of tried to look for an actual male role model and never had one. So I just kind of adapted to what I saw. So that's what I mean when I say the environment I grew up in.
So it's about how this affected your life.
It put me in a position to want more. I mean, to want to discover something different. Basically, what I mean is the way I grew up. My mother was everything. She worked hard, but as far as like trying to find as far as relationships and things like that, trying to be a man, she wasn't able to really, raise me to be that a man. She done a great job. I feel like she done a great job from what she was able to do. But when I was out there, the environment as far as friends I chose and things like that, I just kind of wanted to be accepted, and I just decided, hey, whatever circle I was accepted into, that's the way I would adapt. I would adapt to whatever situation I was in.
Obviously, you eventually came around.
Right. I came around. The book itself tells a lot of wild stories that I actually went through to actually come around. I had to meet the right person at the right time. And I feel like timing is everything. And I feel like meeting the woman that I met, that I described in the book, actually allowed me to actually further my growth as a man and as a father.
So you're a dad now too?
I am a dad now. That it is one of the reasons why it inspired me to write the book. I have a young daughter now. She's 7 years old, and I decided that if I'm going to highlight something, they had to start with me. And if I'm going to highlight something like this, I had to think about how I would want someone to treat my daughter. So this is this All Men Tell Lies is basically a story to highlight, a lot of behavior that I myself created in my life, and I wanted to make sure that even if I'm not around one day, she knows the type of father that she has, or had. I mean, the type of man that her father was at one time, and what it took for him to, become a better man.
So this book is for your daughter, and it should be titled All Men Tell Lies Except Your Daddy.
Oh, no, it's all men tell lies, including your daddy.
Your dad did tell lies, but he came around. You can't trust those other guys.
I came around. But, all men tell lies, I do. It's more of a story about myself and the experience I share, but anyone can relate to it. I feel like anyone that's actually reads my book, men or women, can relate to something in my book. With All Men Tell Lies, I feel like all men tell lies, even if it's just about something minute as, what if a woman asks them, hey, do I look great in this dress? Or, does blue look good on me? We're distracted about something, or if it's something we want to do, we're going to say yes, or, just give you the answer that you want. So it talks about a lot of things like that.
That's a good lie. Sometimes it's better if you do that. Trust me. Trust me, Zach.
Exactly. And that's why I wanted to go with this book. I decided that, hey, all men tell lies. It doesn't mean it has to be a bad thing. It can be a good thing also. I said sometimes it's all about saving ourselves. If we say the wrong thing, that could be, disastrous for ourselves. If we say, hey, if a woman says, hey, do I look fat? And you say, well, maybe you gained a little weight or something like that, that'd be disastrous for a man.
You're absolutely right about that.
Go.
How did you find Paige?
I just Googled. I just did my research, and they stuck out to me, and I think they had something they wanted me just to send like something simple, just kind of describe what the book is about, and they sent me like this pamphlet or whatever, and I was impressed. And then I just did my research from there, and everything just kind of was a great fit after that. I actually was able to even go meet Stephen, I can't remember his last name, the president. I actually was able to sit in the office and talk to him about it in New York. And so I felt very good and very, coming out of that meeting with him. And it was an unannounced meeting. So, I felt very confident in Paige and what I was looking for in a publishing company. I felt like they provided that.
And are you doing book signings or anything? What are you doing to get the word out?
Working on actually get the book signing together where hopefully we can get this set up very, very soon. I think we're working with Books A Million to try to get something together to get a book signing out there in my hometown. So my hometown, Anderson, South Carolina, to get that done. So.
Wow, Zach, you got an audience with Stephen Matthews, the king of page publishing himself. That's pretty good. Very, very nice. I got to tell you, if you ever have any doubts about whether or not to go with Page Publishing, if you're considering maybe another publisher and, you're kind of on the fence, Stephen Matthews is definitely the guy to talk to because you will be convinced once you hear from this guy. Finally, we hear from Joe Walker on the long road home, and what a road this guy was on. This is an autobiography right out of the wild, wild west. Joe, take us from the top.
Well, I was born in Arkansas. My parents moved to Selma, California when I was 10, and we worked in the fields, harvesting grapes, cotton, potatoes, all that stuff, and lived in a tent most of the first year. I was 10 years old at the time. Then I got in a little trouble with the law and spent 23 months in the California Youth Authority.
What'd you do?
Oh, I burglarized some places.
Oh.
Anyway, I got in trouble again with the law in 1964, robbed some supermarkets and went to the Arkansas Penitentiary for 5 years and 8 months. I was there when it was ruled unconstitutional by the federal courts for torture and brutality and inadequate food, inadequate housing. It was ruled unconstitutional, and they appealed it, and they affirmed that it was unconstitutional, and it went all the way to the United States Supreme Court, and it was ruled unconstitutional.
So you kind of got to be a part of history while you were in prison.
Yes. I was there for 5 years and 8 months. A friend of mine, Winston Talley, filed the first writ against the penitentiary, and then others followed after that. There was a lot of changes while I was there for the 5 years and 8 months. Was
that your last stint in jail?
No. I got out of there in February of 73. I robbed the First National Bank in Fort Smith, Arkansas.
Joe, why did you keep robbing places?
My stepson was in trouble, and he needed some money for a lawyer, so I went and robbed the bank.
Joe, there's other ways to go about getting a lawyer. You really think robbing a bank is the way to go?
Nope, not anymore, I don't.
I'm glad you came around.
I am, too.
You're like Jesse James.
Well, some have suggested that.
Okay, don't let me stop you. So you robbed a bank to get money for a lawyer, and let me guess, you got caught?
Yes, I robbed the bank on Monday afternoon, right before closing time, and I got arrested for it on Thursday. I had a jury trial, got found guilty, appealed it, got a reversal, got out, had another trial. In the meantime, I got $44,000, a little over out of the bank, they said, and I had it hid there at the house. Well, then my wife, she paid my lawyer $10,000 and told me someone else stole the rest of it. And so then after I got out on appeal, my lawyer wanted another $5,000 to go back for the second trial. So I went down to Little Rock and robbed a couple of supermarkets to get him some more money, and got caught for that. Joe,
you're killing me here. When did you finally realize, maybe you weren't so great at robbing banks?
I realized that, well, in 1975, I was in the El Dorado jail, and they was transferring me to different jails around the state of Arkansas, about 5 different ones, because they thought I might try to escape, and they thought I might have some outside help. Anyway, there was a Bible there, and I don't know, something come over me one day, and I started reading the Bible, and I talked to God about it, and I told him I'd live by it the best I could understand it, but he would have to help me understand it. I've been doing that ever since.
Joe, that's pretty amazing. Have you taken your book to penitentiaries so maybe other prisoners can read it?
No, I'm not.
Who do you think should read this book?
When I first got the manuscript done back in the 90s, I sold a few, and people kept wanting them, and so eventually I wound up selling about 750 to 800 copies of the manuscript before I ever got it published. And people would tell me that they wanted their son to read this because he's in trouble and maybe it'd help him to get straightened out. Or I've had other people tell me, well, I've done things almost as bad as you, but I just never got caught for them.
Amazing. So you found Page, and now you're officially published. And
well, I sold about 25 on my own here locally, but it's been sold through Amazon and Barnes & Noble and Page Publishing. And
how about book signings?
Well, we live in a mobile home park now, and I had a book signing here. I sold 5. 5 people come to it. I went to my memoirs class, and that lady's still teaching classes, and I sold 17 up there altogether.
You took a memoirs class?
Jenny insisted I do it.
That's your wife. She gets all the credit, right?
My second one.
Oh, that's right. The first wife stole all the money, right? Or said somebody stole the money.
I met her at church. Right now, I've talked to the Selma Enterprise where I grew up and went to school at, and they're reading the book, and they're going to do an article on it. I've talked to another guy for the Fresno Bee, but I don't know if he hasn't indicated whether he'll do an article yet or not. I even sold some copies of my book down to the bank where I do banking business.
That's not the bank you robbed, though, right?
No.
Okay, Joe. Who survives a life like that? Obviously, Joe Walker. I mean, I like the fact that he made a couple $100 just taking his manuscript around and selling it. And then he got his book published. And then he went back to the writing class that he took and sold books to his teacher and some people in his class. The guy is amazing. I don't know. I say this every week, and I don't want you to get bored or anything, but the fact of the matter is you got to start where you are. You got to be like Joe, right? Go to your local paper. Go to your local library, your community website. You say, listen, I'm a published author. I want to talk about how I came up with the idea for my book. I want to talk about some of the difficulties I had actually doing it. I want to talk about my process. I want to talk about what finally got me to get my book published, and I want to help others. I mean, if you say that, I don't know how you couldn't get a positive response. And the bottom line is you don't know if you don't try, right? But first, you got to write it. And the mission here at the Page Publishing Book Club is to inspire you. People write about all kinds of things. Like you might think, I don't know if what I'm writing is something anybody will be interested in. But you know what? Everybody's got a story. You never know who's going to be interested in what you're thinking or what you have to say. Whether you've robbed banks, we had a guy who talked about his experiences with aliens. If you've overcome an unsurmountable situation, if you've come through something that you really didn't know if you were going to get through it or not, and you did, share it. Everybody's got a story to tell, and Page Publishing will give you the tools and the guidance to tell it. That is all the time we have for tonight. Thank you so much for tuning in. Thank you, Rob, my engineer, for making me sound good. You're so cute over there. Yeah, you're killing me. Check in next week right here on 710 WOR for another edition of the Page Publishing Book Club. I'm your host, Alice Stockton Rossini. Get writing this weekend.
Have you written a book and want to get it published? Then now's the time to call Page Publishing at 800-204-6099 and do it immediately. You see, they're looking for authors of all types of books. And unlike most publishers, Page Publishing will take the time to review most of the books submitted to them. And they'll even give you their feedback. And if they like what they read, Page Publishing will get your book into bookstores and for sale online at Amazon, the Apple iTunes Store, and other outlets. They'll handle everything. Copyright protection, printing, cover art, publicity, and editing. So if you've written a novel, a children's book, a cookbook, inspirational work, a book of poetry, or biography, and want to get it published, then you need to call Page Publishing and do it immediately. Call 800-204-6099 now for your free author submission kit. Your road to fame and fortune could very well start with this simple phone call. For your free author submission kit, call Page Publishing at 800-204-6099.